All right, I'm going to go ahead and call to order this meeting of the Quality Municipal Services Ethics and Elections Committee. We are noticed today from Wednesday, October 23rd, from 12 noon to 1 p.m. here at City Hall, room 155. Let's go ahead and start with introductions of assembly members.
Zach Johnson.
Felix Rivera, and on the phone we have Member Constant.
Here.
Great. Wonderful. All right. One note for the record that Member Brawley is excused. All right. So then there's no. Okay, so we only have one item on our agenda today, which is the discussion on vision and goals for the committee. This is for those who aren't aware, this is the third meeting of this new committee. I had hoped to, in the first couple of meetings, have discussion on vision and goals. But we were maxed out of time in those two meetings. And so with nothing else pressing, I decided I might as well take the entirety or not of this committee meeting to have that discussion here. We'll note for the record that Member Littlefield has joined us. Thank you. Okay, so I just got a notification that Member Bronga is on her way, but she's going to be calling into the meeting. So 2 seconds. Okay, so essentially what I wanted to do today, again, is have a discussion on the vision and goals for the committee. And Member Constant, I texted you a little framework that I wanted to use to have this discussion. I'll go ahead and text that to Member Littlefield as well. Actually, if I... Okay, and so essentially what what I'm hoping to do is divide this discussion into three parts. First, talking about the Anchorage School District, the various other municipal departments which fall under this committee, and I'll go over that list in a second, and then ethics and elections. So divide this discussion into three parts overlaid by two different, I think, areas of discussion. First is sort of the oversight discussion, and then any sort of long-term or other kind of work that we want to do in those three segments. So that was how I wanted to have the discussion today. Unless there are any strong feelings, I'll go ahead and move forward with that plan. So starting with the school district, this is relatively new. I think for some time, there have been some assembly members who have talked about really wanting to have some forum, some committee where we have more in-depth policy discussions about the school district and how we as the legislative body want to interact with the school district. And we, up until the creation of this committee, really didn't have a place for that. And at least speaking for myself, I don't have a super clear sort of idea of what that might look like. So obviously we have the annual operating and capital budgets of the school district. Largely those are discussed at our joint quarterly meetings. But is that, and I guess I'll point to you, Member Constant, since you're one of the folks who brought this idea forward. Is that the kind of discussion that you were hoping to have, is around operations, capital budget of the school district on top of the quarterly discussions, or are there other kinds of discussions you hope this committee has with regard to the school district?
Yeah, I think actually budget matters really resolve into the Budget and Finance Committee. And so yes, this is like a catch area for topics that are pushed off of the joint meeting. Like, hey, we need to do more of this or that. Whatever those kind of conversations are, need a home, I think, outside of the budget. And so I don't want to bleed the budget process too much from the budget committees. And so, but there have been any number of ongoing conversations that have come out, discussions about litigation, like you had suggested, or issues relating to, again, I don't want to say the safe routes to schools because we have a transportation committee for that too. So I don't know exactly, but I think just other matters as determined by the joint meetings.
Got it. No, I think that sounds fair to me. Taking some notes. So I think one of the things that would be interesting to discuss, and unfortunately, Carolyn Storm at the meeting yesterday, at the assembly meeting, I think she was getting close to getting to her ask, but I don't think she got quite there yet. So hopefully she will email us her testimony. But my sense is that she was going to have a very definitive ask of support for something related to education funding. My guess is that it's probably related to lawsuits and education funding, but not certain until we hear from her. But I mean, certainly those kinds of discussions, I think, would be appropriate to have here. And then I think, as you said, Member Constant, sort of other matters as decided through the joint meetings. Um, any other thoughts on that? Okay, great. Then moving on to departments. And so the departments that were slated to fall, are slated to fall under this committee, I'll just read through them. That's the municipal clerk, human resources, purchasing, information technology, risk management, safety, GIS, parks and rec, including Chugiak and Eagle River Parks, library, education, but we already talked about that separately. Equal Rights Commission, Office of Equity and Justice, and Office of Equal Opportunity. So those are the various departments and organizations that fall under the auspices of this committee. You know, it was interesting. There was a discussion recently. I forget where we have it. I think it was during the budget discussion actually, where Member Perez Verdilla brought up the idea of doing a little bit of a before and after look at some departments that actually fall within this committee. And I know there was the talk of possibly doing work sessions on that, and maybe that's the more appropriate venue to have those discussions. But as I look through the list, um, I think it would be interesting, speaking from that sort of oversight perspective of looking at some particular departments. And those that I have picked out would be HR, purchasing, IT, and the Anchorage Equal Rights Commission. Of maybe starting off with those four departments as doing a little bit of a more deeper dive oversight kind of look, and having more presentations from those departments at this committee for that part. And then in terms of the long term, sort of more holistic look, one of the things that has been talked about, and it's actually in the committee description, which I will read, is that this committee will explore issues like recruitment and retention to ensure municipal services are delivered at the level residents expect. And of course, that's an issue that overlays all of our departments. And so I think in more of the long-term view, recruitment and retention is slash other view, recruitment and retention, I think it might be an interesting discussion to have, especially as it relates to some of the studies that are being done and those analyses that should be coming out in short order. So in terms of the departments, that's sort of what I'm thinking of, specific departments to look at, and then more of a long-term view. Whoops. It sounds like Member Bronga went to the election center. Sorry about that, Member Bronga. Hopefully, we'll see you soon here at City Hall. Okay, I have Member Constant in the queue.
Yeah, just a word of caution. You just read like 10 or 12 major areas of inquiry. And in some ways, it's too much for this committee or any one committee to manage. And so I think one perspective we have to take is that it's the first phase, other than elections, which I think are really critical to keep on all of the time. It's like we have to do an inquiry into what actually fits and how it works, as opposed to think that we're going to actually be able to provide a venue and an opportunity for all of those things to be in this place. We'd have to meet like 6 hours a month to achieve that, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I think, and that's a really good point, and I agree that it is an extensive list. I think one of the things that I have opened it up to the directors, and I didn't open up for this meeting because I wanted to set aside the time for this discussion, but in prior meetings, I have opened it up to the directors to bring any time-sensitive items that they would like to the committee. And so we did hear both from our elections team, some time-sensitive stuff they wanted to bring to us, as well as from the library, which is why we got that ordinance on libraries and fees that was discussed and reviewed at this committee. So I think in that sense, if we ask any of these departments, do you have any time-sensitive issues that you would like this committee to review? I think maybe I'm being optimistic, but I think that will fit within the parameters of sort of once a month hourly meetings.
Yeah, I think I agree. And I just want to put a note of caution out there that we have to not have an appetite bigger than our stomach, if you will.
Yeah,
I agree.
thanks. No, I agree. And I think that's why I sort of narrowed down to those 4 particular departments, which I know there's been a lot of interest in. And certainly I'm not suggesting we look at all 4 of those simultaneously. Maybe we'll just take one department at a time and have a look at those departments. And then I think time management wise, I think that should work. Any other discussion on sort of departments and how we want to look at departments? Okay, then last leg of this committee is ethics and elections. So under the oversight, I mean, I think we have our normal operations with ethics and elections, which is the annual review of our elections code and then support whatever the elections team might need during elections, which, I think that part of the work will likely be ramping up in short order. So that is sort of what I am thinking in terms of the normal kind of oversight. I don't really have anything in terms of view kind of look at elections. I don't really know if there are any of those long changes that are being discussed. But that's how I envision this committee interacting with ethics and elections. Member Constant, I know you served on that committee for a long time. I have not. So maybe you have different or a better perspective. Thanks.
Yeah, so it's one of the core missions this committee really has to keep at front and center regularly. Elections matters come up regularly. There's an annual review, there's an election, there's a ballot review, there's any number of those kind of activities. And then on top of that, there are discussions, depending on how things go on the 5th, about looking at our elections process and determining whether we want to consider moving Anchorage toward ranked choice process. There are a number of concerns. Also, soon enough will come a review of the apportioned boundaries with a slight proposal to readjust those boundaries. And so all of that's a way of saying the one of the key functions of this committee is and will continue to be reviewing elections material and matters when they come up. And as you know, some years you got 3 elections that come out of nowhere, and it just has to be the venue.
Great, thank you. Member Johnson?
Yeah, thank you. And this might be a question for you, Chris, since you were been on this committee for some time. So I remember that as part of our annual process that we review the code prior to the next round of elections. I'm trying to remember, is there a regularly scheduled sort of debrief after an election takes place where we hear from the clerk or staff about how it went, if there were any challenges or irregularities, anything like that that happens after an election?
Yeah, I don't know if it is kind of formalized that there's a debrief, but it does happen after every election. We have a discussion about what worked and what didn't, and that really does inform the Title 27 or Title 28 changes. The committee has already reviewed those for this year, and so that happened a while ago, and the actual ordinance should be introduced any day. So members will see it in the work section. But yes, it does get reviewed after the fact. Maybe not quite as formally as the preview of the upcoming changes, but yes.
Yeah, and I think just to add a little bit to that, so I'm just looking at some of the prior agendas for this committee when it was just the Ethics and Elections Committee, and does look like they did do a review of the audit of the regular election. In 2022, they did it in May, and in 2023, I think they did it in June. So yeah, that is something that comes up in this committee. Um, then want to note for the record that we've been joined by Member Pronga. All right. Any other discussion? And sorry, you're catching us sort of at the tail end of this discussion, but I will recap the discussion.
I'll watch
Okay. All right. Then I think I have some good parameters then in these three areas of the school district, the various departments which fall under this committee, and then ethics and elections of some of the work that needs to be planned and laid out. And looking forward to engaging that in that actively in the coming months. I think with that, that was really the only discussion that I wanted to have at this committee, unless there's other business that folks want to bring that's timely. Oh yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I have a quick question for you. As this committee finds its footing, it seems like it has grown out of the Ethics and Election Committee and then had an extra piece added to it, which does make some good sense because Ethics and Elections always had a busy season and then about half of its meetings would be canceled. The question for you is, if there are ordinances that are being produced in human resources, purchasing, IT, risk, safety, et cetera, is the model that you'd like them to be routed through here rather than through special one-off meetings? I'm thinking of the port items are largely held at the Enterprise Infrastructure Oversight Committee. We could do something similar here if we had a Title VII ordinance, or if we're changing the structure of the Office of Equity and Justice to the Office of Equity and Inclusion, et cetera, et cetera. Is this the new home for those?
Yeah, thanks. So I'll give my response as the chair, and then other members may have different responses. So I think it's going to largely yes, but it's going to depend on the ordinance. So I'm thinking like Office of Equity and Justice has been something that many assembly members who are not a part of this committee have very strong feelings about. And so that one I think would better be served as a full work session of the assembly. Perhaps there are other ones though, like the library ordinance that was brought forward. I think that's very appropriate to bring here. So I think it just really just depends on the scale of that ordinance and whether there's assembly-wide interest or if it's could be reviewed here.
Can I add just a little flavor to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I offer that as time goes on, it's good for the department heads who are moving those various ordinances to keep in contact with the committee chair. And in that way, just kind of sort through it as an option, because it's often better to start with the committee before going to a full work session, just to get a first. It depends, of course, and time is often like the enterprise committee gets an item that we don't have time for a work session for, but the committee is meeting. And so it should just be an ongoing dialogue about what gets on the calendar. But I would say, yes, that's a good impulse.
Yeah, I agree with that, Member Constant. Does that work for you? Perfect. All right. Not seeing anything else, then I will go ahead and move us on to audience participation. Are there any members of the public who would like to participate? All right. Oh, yes.
I left.
So, yeah, it is new. So, yes, there is. Oh, not the departments. I don't think there is a place that lists the offline. If you have other testimony, though, not after I gavel, we can talk. Okay, then with that, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.